This Habs season is off to a better start than any of us could have ever expected. Some people are tossing this up to coach Martin Saint-Louis, maybe our first line of Caulfield, Suzuki, and Dach, our defense that's been outperforming their expectations, or maybe our goalie tandem who's been one of the best in the league. But there's one real reason, one key thing that ties this all together, and it makes me certain that the Habs' future is set. Let's break that down. Let's take a quick rewind. Let's go back to the 2020 pandemic season where Montreal was doing okay, not amazing, not the best in the conference by any means, but we make the weird pandemic play-in tournament where we play the Pittsburgh Penguins. We beat the Penguins as the underdog, a huge underdog, and we move into the playoffs. We lost in the first round, but Marc Bergevin, the GM at the time, and many Habs fans thought maybe this is the start of something. Maybe this Montreal team is ready to start beating seriously good contenders. The next season comes along in this weird North Division, and Montreal decides to go all out. They don't have the best regular season, but they make the playoffs, and believe it or not, they beat the Toronto Maple Leafs after being down 3-1 in the series. Coach Dominique Ducharme is leading this squad, even though some fans are torn on him at the time, but most accept that he's done a pretty good job with the team that he has. Marc Bergevin made some moves to make the team a little better, and look at where it got us. We beat the Leafs, we swept the Jets, and then we beat the Vegas Golden Knights. We had some of the old guard, Shea Weber and Carey Price, knowing this might be their last chance to go for a Stanley Cup, and they're going all out, doing everything they can to help us win. Unfortunately, in the end, it didn't end up that way as we lost in the Cup Finals to Tampa, but I think us as fans and them as management and the coaches were really happy with how the team performed. We just had Cole Caulfield come onto the team for the playoffs, who scored some clutch goals throughout the entire playoffs, and we were excited to see what was to come for this Montreal team. But heading into the next season, the 2021-22 season, Montreal just collapsed, and it wasn't really their fault. Carey Price, he got injured and we weren't sure we were ever going to see him again, even though we ended up seeing him at the end of that season. Shea Weber, we thought maybe he's done for good. Jeff Petrie said, hey, I kind of want out. I don't really want to be here anymore. And things just didn't feel the same for Montreal. We started doing worse and worse. And the next thing we're at the bottom of the league. Cole Caulfield is not getting anything going. He had one goal and it was really not a great one at the time. And a lot of the fire went to Dominique Ducharme and a lot to Marc Bergevin for good reason, and in November, the decision was made. Bergevin was fired, and Jeff Molson hired Jeff Gorton, formerly of the New York Rangers, to take over. Jeff Gorton was running pretty much everything hockey operations related for Montreal, including being the temporary GM, and the team still struggled. Jeff Gorton brought in a new philosophy with Bergevin out. Of course, Bergevin was known as being a very win-now guy, with a few moves for the future for sure, but very win-now. He wanted to see Montreal succeed, and Gorton came in maybe with a different philosophy with a team that had been struggling. The team struggles continue through Christmas, through the new year, and in January, Jeff Gorton makes what may go down as one of the better moves the Habs have made in the past number of years, when he hired Kent Hughes to take over the GM job on January 18th, 2022. Kent Hughes comes in and he sees this struggling team, and his philosophy is apparent immediately. We need to change the culture here. We need to build for the future. We need to tear down the now. And when I say tear down the now, I don't mean ship out all our good players immediately. I just mean that the philosophy needs to change around Montreal. One of the first moves Kent Hughes did as GM came on February 9th. Dominique Ducharme was fired. Martin Saint-Louis was hired. That's not just Kent Hughes, it's him and Jeff Gorton, of course. But they hired Martin Saint-Louis, a man with no professional coaching experience at all, only minor hockey coaching experience. Martin comes in, and the team just has a new energy. They feel so much better than they were before. Cole Caulfield starts to get things going very early with Saint-Louis. Nick Suzuki starts playing better. Our young defensemen start playing better. Our goalies start playing better. Things are just rolling for Montreal with Saint-Louis behind the bench. That was just the first of many moves that Kent Hughes made, and I want to get into some of the other moves that he made and just why Montreal is now set to be a contender in the next few seasons. The first thing I want to talk about is the big one that everyone's talking about, the draft night trade. Montreal picked first overall, and another Kent Hughes move, they picked Juraj Slafkovsky, a man that they truly believe was the best pick at number 1. Maybe our old guard would have picked Shane Wright, who knows, but I think Slafkovsky was the right pick, and after that, they didn't stop. They made these moves here. They traded away a defenseman that a lot of Habs fans loved, a fan favorite in Alexander Romanov, and a 4th-round pick that ended up being Isaiah George. Isaiah George is an 18-year-old defenseman in the OHL right now, still plenty of potential. For Frank Nazar, what ended up being Frank Nazar with that 13th overall pick. But they took that 13th overall pick and traded it immediately to Chicago with pick number 66, Gavin Hayes. Gavin Hayes is an 18-year-old wing in the OHL, and Frank Nazar has not played yet this year, but he's also 18 out of the U.S. National Development Program. And they got Kirby, Dach. Now, I know you've probably seen a lot of videos talking about this trade and how this has become a steal for Montreal, and it really, really has. This draft night was the start of something special for Kent Hughes. He did make some moves earlier in the season that I will get into, but this draft night just cemented the fact that we are building towards the future. We're going all in on young guys, and we want to make sure that we have the right guys for development. And this trade for Kirby Dach was number 1. He's now our first-line winger, dominating on the first line with Caulfield and Suzuki, and this is just the first thing I'm mentioning. There's a lot of other trades here. You might think that's one of the bigger things he's done, and it's true, it is. That along with Slafkovsky being picked first overall. But I want to get into some more underrated trades that he's made. I'm not going to go in chronological order here. I'm going to go in just sort of a narrative order and just talking about the trades that he did and sort of what they mean. And the first one I want to get into is this one, the Tyler Toffoli trade. Now, a lot of you will remember Tyler Toffoli for what he did for Montreal, not only during the Stanley Cup Finals run, but also in that regular season right before, and even the season after. He was still working hard for Montreal, but he did not fit the Montreal timeline. So what did Kent Hughes do? Well, since Toffoli didn't fit the timeline, he went out, traded Toffoli for a couple prospects, and some picks. Now, if you look here, we got Tyler Pitlick, who's now with St. Louis, no longer with Montreal. Emil Heineman, still in the Montreal system as a prospect. We could see him very soon, at least in Laval. But the big thing in this trade that maybe a lot of you didn't realize is that first-round pick we got from Calgary in this trade turned into Philip Mesar. And if you've been watching the channel, you know how much I love Philip Mesar, how much we love him here at Habs Digest. I think he looks amazing. He's an 18-year-old performing out of his mind in the OHL with the Kitchener Rangers, a team that's really not very good this year. And even though the team is losing a lot of games, Mesar looks outstanding. His shot looks great. He's a shifty forward, can play center or the wing. And I think he has a ton of potential to play with the Habs in just a couple years. He's great friends with Slafkovsky. They're both Slovakian. And I think that's the big piece of this Toffoli trade that maybe you know, maybe you don't know. But, you know, we sort of look at that trade in the past. But that brought in an amazing prospect for us. A draft pick that Kent Hughes went out and made. He made that pick for Philip Mesar. Again, this all links back to the draft night, right? Slafkovsky first, trade for Dach. Pick what seems to be so far an awesome pick in Philip Mesar. And he wasn't done there with getting potential prospects. Like, every trade he made involved either a pick or a prospect, it seems, or somehow shed the cap, or got Montreal some kind of asset. The next trade I want to talk about is this one, and this is what I believe to be the single most underrated trade of Kent Hughes' tenure as GM so far. Brett Kulak, you love him or hate him, he was a solid defenseman for Montreal. He ate up some minutes. He was there for the Stanley Cup Finals run, but he wasn't our best defenseman. He was usually bottom pairing, and he was all right. But Edmonton needed a solid defenseman. They saw something in Kulak, and they were willing to give up one of their AHL level guys and a second-round pick for him. Well, we got William Lagesson, who's played a couple games for Montreal last season, I believe 3, and he's playing in the AHL this year. But we got a second-round pick out of this trade. And who did we pick but Lane Hutson, another player that is a fan favorite on this channel. I love Lane Hutson. He's a 5'7", 5'8", depending on what day you measure him, apparently. He's a defenseman in the NCAA right now, playing with Boston University. The man is putting up over a point per game in the NCAA. I believe it's 10 points in 9 games so far, and he looks outstanding. His offensive ability is off the charts for a defenseman. The only barrier seems to be his size. Because, as a defenseman, not a lot of super short defensemen get into the NHL. I mean, we have some guys like Matt Grzelcyk and Jared Spurgeon who have really carved out roles, but in general, defensemen are big. But Lane Hutson looks special. He won Defenseman of the Month in his conference in the NCAA, also Defenseman of the Week, or Player of the Week once already. He looks extremely good, and we got him, plus another AHL guy in William Lagesson, and a future 7th-round pick for Brett Kulak, who, again, was like all right for us, but we have so many young defensemen coming up, we really didn't need him. It's just another move where Hughes took something we had, turned it into a very positive asset right after. Someone like Kulak, who was okay, we took a gamble on a pick, and they made what seems to be another slam dunk of a pick with Lane Hutson. I know it's a little early to be saying that the pick is a slam dunk, but, I mean, it looks good so far. And the final trade I want to get into here is the Ben Chiarot trade. Again, this is not in chronological order, but these all happened roughly at the same time. You see, this one was March 16th, the Brett Kulak one was March 21st, and the Tyler Toffoli one was February 14th. So they were all around the same time, within a month of each other. But the Ben Chiarot and Brett Kulak deal were within 5 days. And look at this one. Ben Chiarot, on his last year of a deal, Florida was looking for a big, hardy defenseman to put on their D-core for their playoff push. And they thought, hey, let's get Ben Chiarot. They were willing to give up a first, a fourth, and Ty Smilanic, an AHL level, well, an NCAA guy, I believe now. Ty Smilanic is probably not going to turn into much. He's 20 years old in the NCAA, has 1 point in 6 games so far. But they gave us a 4th-round pick in this past draft where we picked Cedric Gwynton, who has actually been playing very well, 25 points in 18 OHL games so far this season. And we have a 1st-round pick coming up from Florida in 2023 after this season. And Florida has been okay, but they've been a little worse than expected. They're not quite at the top of the Atlantic Division yet, and if they don't finish near the top, that pick, even if it's just a mid-first-round pick, with the types of picks that Kent Hughes, Jeff Gorton, and the Habs scouting team have made so far, that could just be another very, very solid player to add to the Habs lineup for the coming years. That trade, along with the Oilers trade, I think, are two of the not even most underrated, because we know about this Florida one, but two of the best trades that Montreal has made so far, Kent Hughes has made so far. Especially for literally half a season to Ben Chiarot. Florida got him. They were tossed out of the playoffs early, and then Ben Chiarot went to Detroit immediately after, and we got a 1st-round pick and a 4th-round pick who looks very solid in the OHL so far. I mean, again, it's just every trade he's done something to improve the Habs. And we'll get into some of his other trades right now. I'll just speak about quickly on some of the other topics, such as the Sean Monahan trade, where we took on Sean Monahan and his $6 million contract for nothing. I mean, Calgary was ready to get rid of him. He was constantly injured. He was a huge paycheck to pay every single year. So they wanted to get rid of him, and they tossed along a 1st-round pick with some crazy protections that I'm not going to get into because it's like 30 lines of protection. I'm not talking about that. But we got a 1st-round pick at some point in the future and Sean Monahan for nothing. And believe it or not, Sean Monahan's been having a resurgence here. He's only 27 years old, and he's been our best guy in the face-off dot. His puck control in the offensive zone's been incredible. His chemistry with his teammates is outstanding. It feels like now, I don't know if we should re-sign him, but it feels like that trade is just an absolute fleece. A 1st-round pick and a solid guy to play as your second-line center. What more could you ask for, right? But not only that, he traded Shea Weber's LTIR contract, a man who's going to be on the injury reserve until he retires. It's pretty clear he's never going to play again. And we got Evgeny Dadonov, a $5 million paycheck, sure, but the plan was originally to trade him around the trade deadline. See if he could play well for Montreal and then ship him out for maybe a future pick or something. Now, that hasn't quite panned out yet, but he did just score his first goal as a Hab the night before I'm recording this video. So, I mean, there's no negative there. Shea Weber is an awesome presence to have around the team, but his contract wasn't doing anything on our LTIR, and we got a usable player in return. There's nothing wrong with that. And another one that I wanted to talk about, the final trade, the Mike Matheson for Jeff Petrie trade. Jeff Petrie made it clear he didn't want to be in Montreal through a rebuild. He wanted to be on a contender, and fair play to him. He was with Montreal. He worked so hard through injury to play all the way up to those Stanley Cup finals. He had a borderline Norris season the season before that. He's been incredible with Montreal, but he wanted to change his scenery, and Kent Hughes granted him that by trading him and Ryan Poehling, a young center, away for Mike Matheson. A slightly lower paycheck than Jeff Petrie, although albeit a longer contract, but a man that fits a lot better with Montreal's style of play, a very fast-paced, high-skilled defenseman who can teach a lot of these young guys some stuff. Now, we haven't seen Matheson play as of the recording of this video, but I'm optimistic that he will do some amazing things for this team. And not only these things. Of course, Kent Hughes, as we mentioned, hired Coach Martin St. Louis as the first move that he did. He made all these trades, but it's not just trades, draft picks, and coach hires. He also had some great extensions. We extended Sam Montembeault and Jake Allen, two guys that have just been such solid backstops for us Jake Allen the last couple of years, Sam Montembeault last year in a pinch. And these guys have been performing great this season. Again, just a smart, low-key move that improved Montreal and is improving morale this season. And the final thing I want to get into when I'm talking about Kent Hughes is I want to compare him a little bit to the philosophy of Marc Bergevin. When you look at their philosophies, they seem to be very different. Bergevin seemed to often be in a win-now mode, trading picks for players, trying to improve his team. One pretty clear example of that is when Carolina took Jesperi Kotkaniemi and we used those compensated draft picks for Christian Dvorak. Sure. Solid trade to win now. Dvorak's a solid player. We made some trades throughout the years for various players to help the team win. But the problem is Bergevin never really looked too far into the future. Sure, of course, there's the Pacioretty trade, where we got Nick Suzuki, Thomas Tatar. Obviously, that was amazing. And if we go way back, the Shea Weber and PK Subban trade that ended up looking great for Montreal. Bergevin had plenty of solid moves. I don't think he had too many awful moves, though you can share your opinions on that in the comments. He never really looked super far into the future. It was always kind of like, let's quickly get some good players and let's try and compete this year. Do you know the last time, before he was fired in November 2021, do you know the last time Bergevin traded for a pick that was third round or higher? I'm not even just saying first or second round picks, because those can be a little rare. But the last time Bergevin traded for a third-round pick or higher was in February of 2020 when we traded Ilya Kovalchuk to the Washington Capitals for a third-round pick. Funny thing about that third-round pick, actually, that ended up being Dylan Peterson, who's currently a center at Boston University who plays with Habs prospect Lane Hutson. The funny thing is, even though Dylan Peterson's a center, Lane Hutson is currently outscoring him by 3 or 4 points in their 10 games. So anyway, that's just a little side note, but I digress. Bergevin never liked trading for lots of picks. He got them occasionally, of course, like the Andrew Shaw trade is a big one where Montreal got a second-round pick out of that. But if you look at the philosophy change from then to now, I know Montreal was a more competitive team under Bergevin. We had a better roster, and right now we don't when Kent Hughes took over. But it's just, I'm not saying what Bergevin did was wrong. I'm saying that the philosophy change is a nice fresh start, something we're not used to, and something that is really pointing Montreal in the right direction. Already, Kent Hughes has traded for a first-round pick in the Monahan trade. Kirby Dach is essentially a first-round pick, and we got a first-round pick when we traded Romanov away in the first place. We got a first-round pick for Ben Chiarot. We got a first-round pick for Tyler Toffoli, ended up being Philip Mesar. We got a second-round pick for Brett Kulak, which ended up being Lane Hutson. Already, in his less than 1 year, less than 12-month tenure with Montreal, he's changed the culture. He's changed everything around the Habs. Everything is looking forward. There's no sadness when we lose. The coach is amazing. He's leading the players. Our first line is finally clicking. The prospects look great. The future of Montreal is set, and we have Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton to thank for it. Well, thank you for watching this very interesting and different edition of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like. It helps us out in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're just at about 2,000 subs. We want to hit 3,000 before Christmas, and we know you guys can help us out with that. So if you could leave a like and subscribe, it would be greatly appreciated. I've been your host, Josh Gosse. We'll catch you in the next video.